So this is the first part of my 3-part 3-minute skill on story writing, and there are many different aspects of story writing that I could go into, but I've chosen the 3 that I think are most important generally for the development of writing skill to start with. Anything you do beyond that is entirely up to you, although I do suggest that you read a couple of books on kind of writing style and that kind of thing. That will help you with grammar and all that kind of stuff. And my main rule for writing is you can't write unless you read, and you should read as widely as you possibly can, because if you only ever read one type of book, you've got no idea about the rest of it really. So even read things you don't think you're going to like, because you may still like parts of them if you don't necessarily like the genre. So character does not necessarily mean the appearance. Whether your character has green or blue eyes doesn't really relate to who they actually are. The true character of a person comes from their history, their family and their choices, particularly the choices they make in their words and actions during the limits of the story, and often quite before as well. There's a lot of backstory that is unsaid when it comes to writing a story, because otherwise it would get rather boring. I read somewhere that your first character and a large proportion of those that follow are really kind of reflections of yourself. Essentially you're writing about how you would deal with a situation, which is all well and good until you start writing about romance or fantasy or science fiction and things that you haven't actually had personal experience with. So the general rule of writing is write what you know, and you need to know your characters well enough that you know how they're going to react given the situation, regardless of what genre you're working in. When I start writing, I don't usually have much of an idea. Maybe sort of a general direction, not necessarily a plot to start with. But I normally sit down and just start writing, see what happens. Normally I'd get maybe a page and a half, and it may not be actual story, may not be narrative, it may well be story notes or character notes, that kind of thing, just ideas of where things should be going. But after I've got that page and a half, I can usually kind of feel the edges of the story and character development kind of starting. At this stage it's very rough and it needs work. But the first thing I turn to is my main character. And it's normally your hero, your protagonist, but I have quite often picked up on the villain and kind of worked them out first. That can be quite an interesting way of doing it. Or if you want your villain to be your main character, then by all means stay with the villain and give them a full kind of backstory. You don't want all your detail to go into your hero and then nothing in your villain, because then it's really unbalanced and doesn't work. So whichever character I've got the most of an idea of, I sort of interrogate them. I ask them what I consider 3 important questions for a general character development. And the first question is, who are you? Which is fairly simple. Second is, what do you know? And that could be pretty much nothing. They could be completely innocent. Or they could have all the knowledge they ever need and are looking for something that's not knowledge related. And the third question is, where are you going? There's always somewhere they're leaning towards or somewhere they're going towards. Now the answers to these 3 questions change and develop as your story develops. And I normally go back through my notes after every edit, and in every pause, if I need to take a pause away from the story, I'll go back through and just add a couple of notes to my character notes. So you keep revisiting your notes and you end up with quite a complicated, I won't say autobiography, but at least a knowledge of your character that will work in your story and anywhere further, anywhere you want to take that character somewhere else. And before a final edit, I read through all of my character notes, and these also include as well as the answers to the questions that obviously change and develop over time. They also include the kind of continuity notes things like their basic appearance or their the clothes they've been wearing. If your story's happened in one day, it doesn't make sense if the clothes suddenly change. Things like that. And I find that if I'm reading a story and something like that doesn't quite fit, something changes and you don't realise, that kind of takes you out of the story. So, although I have been guilty of changing eye colour in the middle of stories, which is what I'm trying to avoid doing. So those sort of things are important, as well as anything to do with the character. So even after I'm satisfied with the story, I never throw away my notes, because you never know when you'll want to bring that character back for another story. Or if you're trying to do something that is completely different to what you've done before, it helps to look at your previous characters and find something that doesn't fit into their kind of character profile. So that is pretty much my idea of character. Now, depending on if you're doing a long or a short story, these sort of things can be half a page or pages and pages. Even my minor characters that only kind of walk on set and then leave, I'll put a little note in for them as well, because you never know how many of these minor characters might turn up later on. So if you can take all of your characters, or at least your major characters in particular, and just say to them, who are you? What do you know? Where are we going? That way, if you lose your way along the writing process, or if you've found yourself blocked, you reread what you thought about them in the beginning and how they developed, and that can help you find your way out of the block. So that is part 1, my 3-minute skill on characters. And I'll see you in probably about 20 minutes for the next part.